we are back after that hiccup and thankfully got almost everything into a cohesive point before I have to do anything else. We took the time while we were gone to switch over to one of the long range characters. In fact, the longest range of long range characters at this time. Or rather, the best demonstration of the thing that is required to determine how this is helpful. You'll notice that her V skill and V trigger are now different once again. As with the Abigail setup, we are going back to 1-1 because Rose benefits from being able to use her teleport, especially cancels off of it, and benefits quite a bit from being able to use Soul Fortune as well. You're seeing that demonstrated here. Her rhythm, of course, will change as soon as you do this because of the differences in timing for animations and the things she will do once the V trigger is active. While she can use the V trigger to teleport in various directions, she only really needs to if she's in the air already and teleports. Going up or down, she basically will always do the same thing, so you don't care that much. It's similar to Nash, we can only fit in so many, so we'll see what happens. The point system for this one is the same, except that you are not trying to deal with Soul Spark. In fact, you're trying to punish that move. You're trying to whiff punish Rose's stand heavy punch. The main reason for this is that Rose benefits pretty much from hitting the stand heavy punch and controlling space if she can get into the position to do it. She gets into that spot and hits stand heavy punch and causes pushback on longer range characters. This puts her at almost perfectly a spot where she has some tiny advantage over them, could jump, or could set up something if for some reason the character thought she was going to jump. She's also much more likely to hit that attack here for various rhythm related reasons. The thing you care about is to not be quite at that spot. If you're playing long range against Rose, you don't want to be in range for you to get hit by the heavy punch. And if you do, it's probably a sign you might be slightly out of position. It does depend on character though. Overall, if you are in that spot where you're getting hit by the heavy punch, you can't whiff punish it, so you can't get the point. That's basically all there is to it. If you find that your character gives you the feeling of, why would I stand outside of the range of the heavy punch? My optimal range is just inside the range of that heavy punch. In that case, you will probably count as the last character type, which is the power through or push through style. Which will be the last one we demonstrate briefly before ending the stream. Overall here though, you can just see that Rose wants to be there. She reaches about that far with her spirals if she thinks you're going to do anything silly. She reaches about that far with her forward heavy kick and a little further with her back heavy kick. She gets to jump and throw out light, or is it light? Yes, light soul spark, and still get away with a bunch of things. Because the characters have much slower buttons from those ranges. They can't necessarily punish Rose either because she can block in time or jump over or any number of other little things, simply because they're, despite having the reach, they don't have the speed with the same buttons they use to get the reach. The Soul Fortune cards therefore are much safer for her to use, simply because if you aren't in the right position, you're not punishing her for trying to activate them either. Even the ones that generally don't do that much. The bot does have the capacity to slightly fake you out by both using the card change, as you're demonstrating here, and using the other setup altogether. She can do the card itself and then often cancel into the trigger if she has enough meter for that, and could be very confusing, honestly. Most of the time, if you were going to hit her in time for just doing card stuff, she will still get hit, but sometimes she won't, and it will really matter because you'll have left yourself open. If you play a character with projectiles, know that the cards will in fact clash and counter the projectiles, so that also adds up somewhere in the systems and plans you could be making. This battle of attrition therefore becomes harder as you go, and obviously punishing the sweep, and with punishing the sweep, still count. But of course, since you're further away, you're less likely to have the same levels of success doing it. We've made it so that Rose slides only rarely, even in the long range form. Mainly because the slide is more so for like soul illusion stuff, and just to remind you that you can't just walk around freely. If you find someone who uses this as a main tactic, you can probably beat them without thinking too hard about it otherwise. Long range characters also have similar problems, as demonstrated by the fact that she can usually do moves that don't extend her hurt box for a while. She draws herself back to do a lot of moves. Soul Spiral starts with a pull back, Soul Spark starts with a pull back. It's basically just like a few normals that don't have this effect. So if you aren't quite reaching, that's why. When your opponent is fighting at long range, being very spinny and dancing more or less doesn't necessarily cause you too much of a disadvantage. If anything, it's just more confusing things they have to deal with. These characters are also often the ones that will not have the perfect punish for Soul Spiral on deck. Once again, because if you're even slightly slow on the reaction, given that Soul Spiral has some weird block stun, you might use a move that is too slow, thinking this'll reach, and she still block, or you might use a move that is too short, because you're playing a character where you're used to being able to reach, and facing off with one that is good at making sure you don't. This makes it all the more important when you recognize, yes, I absolutely can punish that. I know exactly which combo to use too. I can get good stuff here. From the perspective of the power through character, which we will switch to after this round, and then close out, Rose's main strength and the problem she poses is some combination of being able to hit you with her footsie buttons, and having a lot of options when it comes to things like Soul Spark. But these are also characters that usually don't give her the space to use the Soul Satellite. Not that high mobility characters specifically give her the space to do it, but because they can power through, and now because Soul Spiral now only ever has one hit, it's much more likely for characters who use armor to at least consider this option. But it isn't always about using armor, and we're not actually going to demonstrate this using a character that has armor either. But know that if your character uses armor for much, chances are that we aren't in fact going to use the other things, and we'll use the power through for that. Even if your character is generally considered to be high mobility, the only one of them that is iffy and you can't really tell, you just have to choose based on your style of that character, is Urien. A similar thing comes up when you try to do it with Juri, because you could power through some things. But she at least can stop projectiles, so that's where we're going to go for now. And we're finishing this up fairly soon, as noted. So in this case, V skill will be 1, V trigger will be 2. And you get the most difficult of the 4th point systems, the point system D. Rose's illusion turn, her overhead style, even though it does not an overhead and does not even hit crouching, her forward heavy kick is probably the most important thing to deal with when you play this type of character, because it is the move she will most often use to keep you in position when you try to walk forward. If you walk forward and defend, particularly if you defend and crouch at the last moment, because you can't just walk up on Rose, her crouch medium kick is good enough that you can't do it. Generally, therefore, you want to deal with her hitting that attack as quickly as you can. If she whiffs it, you might be able to do something similar to what you can do against Kenbot. But you have to do everything else right first before she'll even start to do it standardly. Most of the time she'll either do it from too far away for you to get any whiff punish at all. But as you just seen there are moments where you're in something like a scramble and the bot has a good reason to do it. Technically, an actual Rose player also has a good reason to do it. But you have a very, very short time to punish this move. She starts to retract her hurt box almost immediately after you've even been able to recognize that the move has happened. And most of the time, despite her coming quite close to you in the timing she hits it, you don't actually get to use any close range moves to do it. You probably have to use one of your longest possible moves. You can use a standing move, there's nothing that says you must use a crouching one. It's just that the easiest way to get her to whiff is that you were crouching at the time, making this even more complicated. It's actually fine to use specials for this as well, but your problem is still the same. If you could execute a special in that space of time on this type of character and not get it blocked, then most likely you had time to press a forward normal or something similar just to get through and not think about it. All of the other point systems are the same, and since you're countering the V trigger again, this is again a matter of dealing with Soul Illusion. Note that since it says counter or evade, if you find yourself blocking it, the only way to get the point is to V-reversal out of it. And for that you have to choose the correct time to V-reversal. You do not get the point in the scenario that thankfully has just come up, where you V-reversal, but Rose does not continue the attack. If you V-reversal the cancel itself. This is not necessarily a bad plan, and the only reason you don't get the point for it is because it's functionally too easy. You don't have to think about it as much, but locking her down for the entire time, as noted, is worth a point. And you can decide how mashy or not mashy you want to be about this, and if you think it's unsafe to do so. Most of the time it will be, because your opponent will probably not have just activated it randomly raw while in range for you to kill them. but you never know. And we're on a roll today apparently. If you whiff punish, or, well, no, it has to be whiff punish. If you whiff punish the forward heavy kick during the soul illusion, yes, you get 2 points. This is more so because it causes you to have the awareness twice. If you tried to punish it, if you try to just hit her while she's doing this, most of the time you'll fail if you just randomly hit the first thing you could hit. And the heavy kick will either hit you or lead to something useful from her side. And if you did succeed because you went, oh, I am in defensive mode mentally now, she's just hit this heavy kick, I know what to do, then that's still effective, it still counts as this is working. So you should absolutely take the point for that. And just take 2. So for the final demonstration, we'll have one more round after this one where we really go into specifically why certain things and flows are happening, so that you understand if your bot isn't working correctly. If you've stuck around this long, it's probably the sort of thing you want to know, especially if you're rewatching on YouTube or similar, to figure it out. Obviously, it's not easy to demonstrate things that could go wrong with a bot, but we can at least talk about things that count as not going right. If you're not seeing certain things, it means your bot probably isn't performing at the level you want. But again, because Rose does so many things, it could just be that she's doing it extremely rarely. So, do consider it. It is generally best, as you've probably been able to see demonstrated, to go for that medium punch after the dash somewhere. Both because she really needs to hold the medium punch either way, and because the range she fights at tend to mean that she dashes up and clips you with the tip of the medium punch, unlike most of the other characters who dash and are trying to get into your face. Which is why, again, we don't really want the throw to be the thing she does after the dash most of the time. If Rose is dashing up on you successfully, in that scenario you might want to do some more practice of some other type with some other bot. She'll obviously do it occasionally, but usually you get to see it go more so the other way. She'll dash up, you won't be quite ready, or you won't be quite in range, and the medium punch will be the most useful thing. So if you find that the medium punch never happens after her dashes, then you probably need to touch upon that incredibly annoying, long and difficult first input. You're not as worried if she's not doing really good soul illusion combos, because really you don't want Rose to get too far into her soul illusion combos, or rather lockdown block strings. You don't want it to happen anyway. If you have no options, then your opponent will probably have developed whatever they want, and so on. What you do care about is trying to get the jumps correct enough in timing that her jump attacks are credible, while she still has this sort of random ability to neutral jump. Occasionally, this one you will nearly never see the neutral jump, which is why the ups matter. But more importantly, that she empty jumps sometimes, or jumps with light punch or something, recovers quickly, lands, and then does something else altogether, usually throw. This has to do with the holding up forward for fairly long aspect that happens in one of the inputs mentioned, and that should get you enough variation in how exactly she jumps that you have to care. You can see, for example, here that while our jury is doing a phenomenal job of keeping the spacings correct and being ready for things, Anti-airing is then the thing that becomes hard, because again, Rose is hard to anti-air. It takes a lot from the opponent's side to make her really hard to anti-air, but she's hard to anti-air. And just when you think, okay, I probably got it, she might just jump in Soul Spark instead. The various uses of her Soul Punish, the orb, won't always come in the best timings, but they're good enough most of the time that she'll set up the orb on top of / in front of you. And she obviously has access to the EX version as well, which basically explodes instantly. She has so much in terms of options there that any given knockdown could be followed by many things. If you find that she acts too predictably when she lands the knockdown on you, I wouldn't necessarily know what to tell you, even because I can't see a way that that would happen easily. But even more reason to touch up on it if it looks like it's going that way. One of the main things you're going to have problems with is that Rose feels like she's a floaty jump character, but I'm pretty sure she isn't, which means you don't have that much time to do your anti-air. It's similar to the problem with Ibuki having a really good jump and you're constantly trying to be ready to anti-air, but it just doesn't work out because she's slightly too fast or something else she did put you off guard. If you've got an invincible anti-air, you're probably better off, but unfortunately Rose is also a character who's good at cross-ups in a way that will lead to her requiring you to do cross-up versions of that anti-air. There's an entirely, let's call it, different way of thinking about this relative to whether or not your character must use a grounded button for an anti-air or has a special one. And in Juri's case, for example, one of her better options to this is just air to air. Air to throws also count. Just deal with Rose by getting into the air with her. Not the most natural thing for our current player, but it's still among your better options. Because at least then you don't have to wait, you get to go up to meet her, and she tends to hit buttons a bit later than most characters because she can. It also helps because if you happen to be in the right spacing, you'll end up jumping over her, recognizing that this is happening, and getting a weird cross-up of your own instead of having to go for specifically getting the input timing correct and still also getting the recognition of her spacing correct. You don't really care where Rose is. Most of the time you're either going to get slightly touched or she'll just slide right under you the same way that Seth has this problem. But that won't solve your problem either because, again, if you could just air to air, then I would count her as easy to anti-air instead of hard. There are certain places where you need to do the actual anti-air, certain ranges, and certain ones where, yeah, she's too close, I don't know, let me air throw. So once, again, as always, don't count on this bot for really complex things. It will sometimes do randomness. It is in your favor and in your interest to learn how to counter just randomness happening. To get to the point where just seeing the thing causes the reaction instead of having to expect your opponent to do it. That will help you out as well. But once you've gotten past that hurdle of the first input and its large complexity, hopefully you'll be able to use this bot to get some experience in this matchup and understand all of her tiny quirks that make her a relatively strong character by our reckoning so far, despite looking as if she does mostly basic things. She's harder to stop from doing those things than many other characters. That brings us to the end of this Guidance stream. The bot page is close to done, but we still want to finish up on some final research and tests. Therefore, it will be available at the usual time on Sunday. If it's early, it'll be because we know something won't be possible on Sunday. So you can look out for it around the same time as we normally have streams, 7 Eastern. Sometimes we release it earlier by an hour or so. And of course, you will be able to find it at 2-mk.org/rose-bot. Or of course, just put in bots and navigate from the bot page. I don't think we're going to get the in-depth written up, but it'll mostly be things that are repeated here. So if you are waiting for the in-depth, but you watch this whole stream, you're missing nothing. And you can expect it probably later on. This has been Rillian 142MK. We will be posting information on our Twitter when the bot releases, 2_MK_FGC. But that's all for tonight. Good luck with your training and good night, everyone.